Pope Francis attended the G7 meeting talking about artificial intelligence, and there's now this famous photo, the mind meld. Pope Francis, Joe Biden, Milei. Look at Milei. He's up in the corner like he's the president of Argentina. He's like, what is going on here? There's the video. It's kind of short. I didn't think it's worth playing, but I was surprised. I was reading the Wall Street. I got the Wall Street Journal, and I was like having a great Catholic dad summer. And I got the Wall Street Journal front page. Biden, Francis coming in for that head bump. There it is. Why is this important? This is important because this is, whether you like it or not, whether you recognize it or not, this is Pope Francis campaigning for Joe Biden. I covered it in the last election. The Democratic Party put out a whole video of Biden and Francis, like a montage video of them hanging out. And they're doing it again. All right. There are people in America, kind of Catholic, left-wing, maybe boomer, maybe younger, who see this picture and they're like, this is a sign from God. I have to vote for Joe Biden because he is the devout Catholic, former altar boy presidential candidate. Never mind that he's pro LMNOP. He's pro A-word. He wants to fund it. He wants to promote it. He wants America to pay for it on every continent of planet Earth. But they're going to see this video of the mind meld, and they're going to say, see how much Francis loves Biden. He is the Catholic choice. He is the only Catholic choice. And that's why when I woke up to this, look how unhappy I am here. I have my Captain Salty hat on. I'm about to have fun. And that's the cover of the Wall Street Journal. And look at the headline here. I'll blow it up for you. In a G7 first, heads of state meet. Ha, ha, ha. This kind of ruined the morning. We were going to go sharking. Here we are sharking. Hold on.
All right, got a video rolling.
Video rolling.
Double father son.
Father
Sharking.
son sharking. All right, we're moving.
Toss him.
One. Get a little closer. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Boom. That's Catholic dad summer right there. South Carolina. Also want to send my props and my love to Sacred Heart Catholic Church, Charleston, South Carolina. Our family went to the Holy Sacrifice, the Mass, solemn, high, traditional Latin Mass. It was beautiful. It was in the Sacred Heart Church during the month of the Sacred Heart, and they transferred the feast day of the Sacred Heart from Friday to Sunday because it's their patronal day for the Solemn High Mass. Very blessed to be with the Catholics in South Carolina, worshiping with them during this Catholic dad summer. So love and props. Speaking of love and props, I've really assumed a lot of the teenage lingo that I use wrongfully on purpose with the kids, the teenagers. So as you know, we have 3 adult children. We have 3 teenagers, 2 littles. And I just, I throw out the words Riz, drip, Sigma, skibbity, whatever it is. And you just use it wrong. Like, man, mom was wearing drip today at church. And I'm like, Dad, what? Like, if your son takes out the trash, you're like, Sigma move, bro. That was Sigma. And they're like, Dad, please stop. But that's what Catholic Dad Summer is all about. There's also some news today. Pope Francis back in the news, and I'll do some questions and I'll do some comments. But there's been this scandal in London. It's been going on since, I think, since the Vigano days, maybe that far back of the initial, maybe 2020. I've covered it several times. I've done a lot of videos. And there's now a UN investigation. Let me see if I can share this with y'all. Share the screen. There's now a UN investigation of the Vatican, which may include the Pope, for wiretapping. LifeSite News, article by Andreas Walliser, Michael Haynes, senior Vatican correspondent. Pope Francis faces a United Nations human rights investigation for allegedly authorizing illegal wiretaps on British financier Raphael Mincioni during a Vatican embezzlement trial involving the sale of a luxury London real estate. There's been this London real estate that keeps popping up, and that allegedly it's some kind of money laundering scheme. Now, I explain this in my book, Infiltration, if you haven't read it, that one of the handicaps of the Catholic Church in the last 100 years is the invention of the IOR. That's the name of the Vatican Bank. As I discussed in Infiltration, every criminal on earth, every billionaire on earth wants there to be one bank that is not regulated, one bank that is invisible. And there is only one bank on earth that is not audited or patrolled by a government, by the EU, by the UN, by the United States, and that is the Vatican Bank. As a consequence of that reality, they are constantly trying to burrow their way into the Vatican Bank. We saw this already under Pope Paul VI, and you can read about that in a whole chapter of how in the 1960s and especially in the 1970s, there was a series of scandals with the Vatican Bank. If you've seen Godfather 3, it picks up on that scandal. Of course, Godfather 3 embellishes it and changes it. But what you see going on there in Godfather 3 with the so-called Immobiliare and the Vatican Bank and loans and transfers of money as it relates to Sicilian mafia, a lot of that is true. And I document the truthful parts in Infiltration. And you'll see that people did die. One guy in particular was hung in London over the sketchy. So read Infiltration if you want to get the full news. But now we have Pope Francis, who is, according to this article, under UN investigation for allegedly authorizing illegal wiretappings of phones during the Vatican embezzlement trial linked to the sale of luxury London real estate. So I'm going to jump over to comments and questions. There's two topics today that we're going to discuss. The first is this a campaign move? Is this a boost for Joe Biden in an election year? I mean, in case you're wondering, here it is on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. It was all over the news. All you got to do right now is search Biden, Pope Francis, put it in your search bar, and there are tons of pictures and articles and headlines of all the major news, MSNBC, everything, showing the video, showing the picture, making a big hoopla about it. I say it's campaign for Biden. It is the most low-key, see, I use another one of those teenage words. It's the most low-key example of endorsement without officially saying, I endorse Joe Biden. And before you disagree with me, ask yourself this question. Would Pope Francis ever allow this photo to be taken with him with, like, I don't know, Donald Trump? Secondly, do you think that this investigation of wiretapping with Pope Francis, with the UN, will go anywhere, or will it kind of disappear? What do you think on that? I'm going to turn to your comments and to your questions. And before I do that, I want to remind everyone this is the time of year in which people are moving. It's between school years. If you want to move from one part of the country to a different part of the country, maybe move to a red state, move where you can get to a traditional Latin Mass, traditional Catholic schools, make the move for your family, I recommend, I trust realestateforlife.org. They will put you in contact with a real estate agent in your area and in the area where you want to go to sell your home wherever you are on earth and to move wherever you want to go on earth. Lots of people are making this move. They're moving to places like Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Oklahoma. If that's on your agenda and you want to get started, contact realestateforlife.org, realestateforlife.org. Tell them you heard about it on the Dr. Taylor Marshall Show, and I would appreciate it. Also, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel at Patreon. If you want to be a patron and support my podcast, my writing, my work, go to patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. There's different levels that you can support, and I'll send you signed books, rosaries, different kinds of merch. Look at the different levels, patreon.com/Dr. Taylor Marshall. And one more, this is brought to you by NSTI, the new St. Thomas Institute. It's where I teach in an academic setting philosophy, theology, Old Testament, New Testament, the Latin Mass, the Roman Rite, apologetics. It's all online. It's all streaming. If you and your family want to tap in and study the Old Testament, study the New Testament, take a course on how to share your faith with Jewish friends, Muslim friends, Protestants, evangelicals, we have all the content, me teaching courses in bite-size pieces, usually around 10 to 12 minutes per course. It's all streaming. It's easy. It's inexpensive. People use it for schooling. People use it for advanced ed. We have deacons doing it, priests, nuns, all kinds in over 50 countries. So if you want to take your faith to the next level and become a confident Catholic, sign up at nsti.com. Summer enrollment is now open. The new St. Thomas Institute. Sign up as a student, and I'll see you in there. All right, now we go to your comments and to your questions. Really want to know what you guys think of the Mind Meld photo, this photo right here. Let's talk about it. What do you think? John Wick, one of my favorite commentators on the Dr. Taylor Marshall podcast, he writes, photo campaign gimmick for Catholics in name only, the two-timers who show up on Easter and Christmas. Yeah, I think a lot of people saw this on the news and they're just like, oh, see, that's our Catholic president. I'm a Catholic. He's a Catholic. Pope Francis is a Catholic. Let's vote for Joe Biden. All right. I think this photo right here, truly, I really do believe this. This photo swings millions of voters, Catholics. That's my take. And I suspect there will be more of these photo ops. All right. Let's see who else has a divine intervention. Or Ontario says Argentinian president in the background. Interesting. He is not pleased, is he? Let's see if I can. No, it's the wrong one. I don't think I can blow it up. But yeah, there he is in the background. Malay. By the way, a lot of people think Malay is based. Malay is awesome. He's done some good things for Argentina. He's definitely cut down on some of the corruption, but I don't think Malay is based. Malay is not Christian. Malay is not Catholic. I heard he clones his dogs. There's some weird stuff about Malay. So I'm not a fan of Argentinian President Malay. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments and questions. Leave a comment below. Maybe you think Malay is based and good. I don't know. All right, more comments. Here we go. Janet says, unfortunately, too many Catholics don't know what is going on and will think the relationship with Francis is a positive thing. Biden-Francis. Oh my. Janet, I agree with you. I agree with you. Low info Catholics will see this and they'll think this is an imprimatur. Pia Barlota says it was allowed, but he doesn't look too thrilled about it or that it was planned. Look, if it were Trump, I guarantee you there would have been instructions, do not access the Holy Father. Right? This is a level of proximity. I mean, we're talking here about the President of the United States and the Pope. It's not like you just wheel the Pope Francis in on a wheelchair and just let things go, let sparks fly. Let's see where this goes. No, there are protocols here. Now, I understand that Joe Biden is perhaps not fully mentally with us right now. So, they might have said, hey, Joe Biden, just be respectful on the Pope. And he might have just had a moment where, I don't know, maybe he came in to sniff. Maybe he wanted to see what the Pope smelled like. I don't know. So, yeah, maybe this was an accident and it's just sort of a senior moment for Joe Biden. But I think that, when you're talking about access to perhaps two of the most powerful people on planet Earth, again, you just don't kind of let things happen. So I think there's something here. Athena Murphy says he passed the sniff test. Ba-doom, boom. Shredder says most voters will forget that photo in a week until Biden makes another gaffe or sniff. But here's what you don't understand, Shredder. The internet, this picture can be pulled out over and over and over and over and over. It can be memed. Right? So, yeah, I think a lot of people will forget this. But also if people who are low info are like, who should I vote for? Man, Biden, he seems so old. And is that even really him? And he's got Botox and he's, making mistakes and saying embarrassing things. Should I vote for him? And then they don't really like Trump and they see this photo. They're like, yeah, okay, Biden. He's not the best, but he's Catholic. He hangs with the Pope. They do head-to-head moments. I'm going to vote Biden. Thakobe says, memed. Yes, that means that's the past tense of meme. To make a meme. To be a meme. Mark S. Off topic. Dr. TM, what's your opinion on married men becoming deacons? I feel, Mark, like we did this question recently, but I'll dip back into it. In the Eastern Church and in the Roman Rite, in the Western Church, it is the teaching that when the sacred ministers, and sacred ministers are subdeacons, deacons, priests, and priests includes bishops, archbishops, cardinals, popes, when they enter into the holy sacrifice of the Eucharist, they must be chaste and not have relations. Now, if you're celibate, that means you're not married, so it shouldn't be a problem unless you are, doing evil sins as a priest. And that's mortal sin. It's bad. But in the Eastern Church, as you know, they allow for married subdeacons, married deacons, and married priests, not married bishops. But I have a friend who is a married Catholic Eastern Orthodox priest. And he confirmed for me, he told me that on Saturday night at Vespers until Sunday night Vespers for 24 hours, even though he's married, he is not supposed to have relations with his wife because, he says, he is entering into the holy sacrifice in persona Christi. He represents Jesus Christ. And so his relationship for Sunday in the person of Christ is himself relating to the bride of Christ, the church, the congregation. And so in a way, he steps out of time, he steps out of his marital role, and he steps into his role as priest, as alter Christus, another Christ. Same applies to deacons, subdeacons. They are entering into the Holy of Holies. Now, That's not really a problem in the Eastern Church, because usually in the Eastern Church, they only have the Holy Eucharist, the Holy Sacrifice, on Sundays and major holy days. So married priests can have their priesthood and have a somewhat restricted conjugal life. The Western Church early on adopted daily Mass, daily sacrifice of the Mass. If you have daily Mass, you have Mass on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and there's a 24-hour period of continence, chastity, that would mean that the priest would have to be celibate, not just continent or chaste on a Sunday or a feast day. And so in the West, we have seen that our subdeacons, deacons, priests, and bishops on up have been not just chaste on Sundays, or continent on Sundays, but entirely celibate. There have been some exceptions over time, but entirely celibate. This is something that goes back to the Old Testament. You could see it in my book, Crucified Rabbi, where before they received the law from God, Moses tells them, married people do not have relations for 3 days while we wait for the law of God on the mountain. Again, the Catholic Church does not believe that marital relations are sinful, bad, evil, wrong. Just as when we don't eat food before the Eucharist, we have a Eucharistic fast, it's not because we believe food is evil and it will corrupt us from receiving the Eucharist. Instead, we say no to that which is allowed, food, and if you're married, relations in certain contexts, in order to prepare for something supernatural and higher, not on pain of sin. Well, I guess the Eucharistic fast is on pain of sin. Not because it is sin, but because there is a greater good. That is a deep theology. That is patristic theology. That is medieval theology. That is Eastern theology. That is Byzantine theology. That is just Catholic. And when you just, in the 1960s and 70s, bring in married deacons and you don't do the theology and you don't do the analysis and you don't talk about the liturgy and what it means to be ordained, I think we've done ourselves a grave injustice. So I personally am not in favor of married deacons. And if we were to have married deacons, it would have to be like the Eastern Church has married deacons, but no one talks about these issues. So that's the take. I've said more about it in other places, but, and then one other thing is, it's not a permanent deacon technically, because every deacon is permanently a deacon. Every priest that you know, every Catholic priest is also a deacon. You might be like, well, he used to be a deacon, now he's a priest. No. Every priest is a deacon. Every bishop is still a priest, and he is still a deacon, and he is still a subdeacon, and he's still an acolyte. It's like Russian nesting dolls, is how holy orders is traditionally understood in the Catholic Church. This is why the bishop, even as back as like 700, 800 AD, the descriptions is the bishop in Holy Mass wears the tunicle of the tunicle of the subdeacon, the dalmatic of the deacon, and the chasuble of the priest, and the mitre of the bishop. He wears the vestments of subdeacon, deacon, priest, because the bishop is a subdeacon, deacon, priest. So the subdiaconate, the diaconate, and the priesthood are all permanent. Like Fulton Sheen was a bishop. He was also a priest. He was also a deacon until the day he died. He's still a deacon because it's an indelible character. So I think the whole idea of permanent versus transitional diaconate is also not a proper theological understanding of the diaconate. All right, back to your comments and questions. Also, do y'all think that this situation with Francis and the UN and the wiretapping is going to be a problem? Here is, by the way, the headline from LifeSite News. Encourage you to go read the full article. I'm not going to take everybody's time now, but there it is. Pope Francis faces UN investigation over alleged illegal wiretappings in the embezzlement scandal. Do you think this is going to be a problem, or is it going to go away? Is Francis innocent? What's your take on that? Speaking of Eastern Church, have you done any videos on the new approved document on papal primacy? I have been on vacation, Catholic Dad Summer, for the past week, and although I've read about it, I haven't got too deep into it, but I will. I will get into it. I suspect it's probably not a helpful document because what was said at Vatican I was said at Vatican I. The Pope has supreme universal jurisdiction over every baptized person, and that jurisdiction is immediate. What does that mean? That means that the Pope can extend his jurisdiction over any baptized person immediately that is not through a mediary. So he doesn't have to call up the Bishop of New York City in order to deal with someone in New York City. The Pope can directly, without any mediation, go directly with his jurisdiction over any baptized person. He could call out a nun, a priest, a deacon, a layman, a laywoman, a professor. He has that universal jurisdiction because Jesus said, as we all know in the Gospel of Matthew, he said to Peter, "You are Peter, and on this rock I build this church. Whatever you bind west of Italy is bound on earth. Whatever you bind in Europe, it's bound in heaven." No, that's not what Jesus Christ said when he gave the Petrine keys to the Peter and to his successors. He said, "Whatever you bind on earth." This is why the idea that the Bishop of Rome, the successor of Peter, does not have jurisdiction over the Eastern patriarchs is just wrong. They say, well, he has authority in the West, but he doesn't have authority in the East. Well, that's not the teaching of Matthew 16. Matthew 16 doesn't say, Peter, whatever you bind to the west of the Aegean Sea. No, he says, whatever you bound on earth. So what was said at Vatican I is said at Vatican I. We can jumble it up. We can shake it up. We can make it ambiguous. But what was at Vatican I is at Vatican I, and every Eastern Orthodox person in the world knows what Vatican I says. So you can write a document, but until you go to the Eastern Orthodox and say, we formally reject and disavow Vatican I, they don't really care. The Eastern Orthodox won't really care until you just say, we don't believe in Vatican I. And I believe in Vatican I. So Mr. B says, what goes on Vatican I stays on Vatican I. I don't know about that, but what goes on at Vatican I is still binding to today. Yeah, this came out. Bellator S. Christus, do you have any personal sources in Rome to clarify more details on the ending of the Latin Mass? This was dropped by Rorate in the last 24 hours, and they're like, we're breaking this. This is coming from us first. Everybody in the space has been hearing the whisperings of the destruction, the final countdown, the final destruction, what I called the end game a while back. We've been hearing about this for at least 6 months. There have been, and I know people personally, I won't reveal who they are, who have had conversations with bishops in the United States and elsewhere who have been told by Rome that there is a countdown clock, that you should implement Traditionis Custodes, restrict the Latin Mass, particularly out of parishes, restrict it to the FSSP, Institute of Christ the King. But there is an end game to it all. I've mentioned it before in the video, so it's not a major revelation today that, oh my goodness, did you hear that there's an end game? Traditionis Custodes was the preamble to this end game. I don't think it'll be successful. That's why I'm not worried about it. you saw after Traditionis Custodes came out, you saw Cardinal Roche picking up the ball and trying to run and score some more yards with it. And there was so much pushback from lay people, priests, and even bishops back on Rome, and even in the secular media. You know, Pope Francis is being dogmatic and legalistic with this tradition. They just don't like the optics of it. It's very legalistic, very rigid, very legal, very canonical. It's everything against Pope Francis's persona and his charisma, his riz, right? It's against the papal riz. What is riz? It's charisma. So he backed down. You kind of saw like the wind in the sails of Cardinal Roche kind of went slack, you know, and things kind of died down because it was so unpopular. Pope Francis isn't doing well. It has been one of the most unpopular elements in the Bergoglian reign. And I think he's a little gun shy about it. Does he want to get rid of the traditional Latin Mass? At the end of the day, I don't think Francis as a Jesuit knows much about liturgy and doesn't necessarily see that as the war, as the battleground. There are people around him, and I think Cardinal Roche is definitely one of them, that wants to choke it off. No more TLM. There's definitely those forces. They're definitely talking about it. They definitely want it to happen. And from what I've heard, it was 2 to 3 years after Traditionis Custodes, there would be yet another round, the end game. And this would then dovetail with what I years ago called the corral theory. What is the corral theory? Down here in Texas, we have corrals. You lead animals into corrals. When you get them in the corral, you close the gate, boom, they're in the corral. What they want to do is push all the traditional Catholics, you and me, push us, drive us, yeah, come on, you little doggies, push us, get us into a corral, probably the SSPX, Society of St. Pius X. So that means they could shut down or minimize the Fraternity of St. Peter, perhaps. Institute of Christ the King, perhaps. They're already putting extreme pressure on the diocesan traditional Latin Masses. And then all the people who are like, well, I want to go to Latin Mass, they drive over to the SSPX and just kind of get everybody kind of moving over there and say, you know, we tried to be nice to you. We gave you a cookie. We gave you space. We were nice to you, but you just wanted to have that traditional Roman baptism for your kid and that traditional Latin Mass nuptial wedding. You wanted to get married in the Latin Mass, and you just pushed it too far. And so we have to take your cookie away. We tried to be nice to you, but you guys pushed it too far. And now look at you. You ran into this corral over here, and you're basically cutting yourself off from all of us, good Catholics. That just proves that you are skizzy. You are schismatic. And so we're going to close the gate, and y'all are in the corral. And once a year, we will have an ecumenical endeavor with you and take some photos, just like we do with the Greek Orthodox, the Russian Orthodox, the Coptic Church. We're kind of in partial communion. It's fuzzy. We're in union, but we're not really in union. And y'all are kind of skizzy, but we're not going to make that clear. And that is the St. Gallen Mafia endgame for the corral. And they know that the traditionalists will never compromise on the liturgy. If they say, well, you can have an ad orientem novus ordo in Latin, they know the traditional Catholics will not settle for it. They know that. We know that. The chessboard has been set. Check or checkmate. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. back into your comments and into your questions. Lynn Nugent says, I'm having a TLM wedding. That's right, you are. Do it. Kathy D says, why though? Why no Latin Mass? People who think like Cardinal Roche, they say that the traditional Latin Mass does not express the vision and the theology of the Second Vatican Council. And because of that, it must be removed, because people who attend, according to them, the traditional Latin Mass, for some reason, the ecumenical spirit of Vatican II, the tolerant spirit of Vatican II, the Jesus is the way, but there's also lesser lights that lead people to the Father. For some reason, people who go to traditional Latin Mass do not absorb those beliefs. They're very, you might say, as one man in Rome once said, they're very rigid. They want to baptize their babies quickly. They don't want to wait a year. They want the baby baptized in the first week. They don't want to go to church and see ecumenical visitors like Lutherans or Anglicans giving blessings, saying prayers. They don't like that at the Vatican either. They don't want to pray with Muslims. They don't believe that they should be praying with Jewish people who don't pray through Jesus Christ our Lord, Son of God. These people are resistant to the ambiguities and to the cushiness and the laid-back vibes that have been all the rage and style since 1965. They're rigid, you know. These people believe that nuns should wear veils and habits, and priests should be called father, and monks should wear their habits, and bishops are your excellency, and you should kiss their ring, and there's a real hierarchy, and that the Catholic faith is the Catholic faith is the Catholic faith, and it never changes. They want that old-time Roman religion, the Roman Catholicism that their grandparents and their great-grandparents, all the way back to the time of Joan of Arc, all the way back to Thomas Aquinas, all the way back to St. Gregory the Great, St. Leo, all that. They want all that. You know, they don't want I'm going to say some names, but I'm not going to say some names. But you know, fill in the blanks. Popular Catholics of the last, 20 to 40 years. So that's why they don't like the Latin Mass. Dan, moderating, he says, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you for the reminder. Please like and share. There it is. Thank you for the reminder, Dan. Pia Borlata, do you think if Pope Francis was found to be involved in the wiretapping, it would actually be made public? I think he would. My sense is, 5 to 10 years ago, the EU, the UN, the powers that be were very pro Pope Francis, cheerleading him. This is our guy. We love him. He's writing about being green, the environment. He's talking about politics with a more South American socialist bent. He is laid back. You know, he's non-judgmental when it comes to the LMNOP agendas. So, but now he is not healthy. He is older. He's accomplished many things they like, but he hasn't accomplished everything. My perception is that they are already positioning, as I said, the chessboard is set. They're already moving their pieces for number 2, Francis II. I think that he'll be called John Paul III. That's my take. Unless there's a miracle and we get a magnificent, holy, Orthodox, traditional pope, which could happen. I pray for it all the time. Rosaries, mass intentions, fasting. We need to pray and ask for this, and it can totally happen. But if it didn't happen, I think we'll get sort of another Jorge Bergoglio who may be a little bit more responsible with his image, not as laid back like a South American Argentinian, and we'll take the name John Paul III, and we'll then begin to move forward on what's lacking. GF Dad, address the question, Marshall. Did you take Pfizer money? No. I didn't get the jab. I got pure blood. I never did an advertisement. I never talked to anybody. In fact, I've done many videos. If you've seen any of my videos on PFizzer, my audience knows about PFizzer, a humorous reference. You know where I stand on that. Now, Pope, I was just saying John Paul III. Pope Francis has met twice with the president of PFizzer and has gone on record saying it's an act of love and that Catholics should receive that medical treatment. But not me. Not me. I am not, what's his name? Travis Kelce. I am not Travis Kelce. I did not get a multi-million-dollar deal to wear the Band-Aid and tell y'all to do it because I'm against it. Angela Pacelli Servideo. Is there a difference between the different priests, for example, the Jesuits and Franciscan orders? Absolutely, yes. There are many orders. There are the Benedictines, the Franciscans, the Dominicans. There's reforms of the Benedictines, like the Cistercians, the Trappists. There are the Jesuits, which are from the 1500s. Many different religious orders. They have different lifestyles. Some of them live in monasteries or abbeys under an abbot. Some of them travel the world and are missionaries. This was often the case with Franciscans, Dominicans, and yes, even Jesuits. Whereas a Benedictine or a Cistercian or a Trappist is going to live in a monastery. All those rules pretty much mirror the same with the female corresponding order. So yeah, they're all supposed to have the same Catholic faith, same beliefs, same morals, but they have what's called a different charism or calling to live either more in the world, less in the world, in more of community under a leader in obedience like an abbot, or perhaps more in the world in a missionary role, or perhaps in a teaching role, or in a medical role, etc. So yes, and there are hundreds of religious orders out there. Let's see. I missed some super chats. JD Rahal, hearing about the Vatican doc that totally bans the TLM. Yes, this has been whispered for over 6 months, that there's an end game. By the way, I have a YouTube video called End Game. So after this video, go watch that one, End Game. Father Ripperger has another super chat from Lord of the Rings 25. Father Ripperger, within the limits of papal authority book, lays down the principles that to ban the Latin Mass is beyond his authority. It would be considered sacred tradition similar to sacred scripture. Yes, I recommend Father Ripperger's book on the limits of papal authority, and I did an interview with him. When was that? A few months ago, maybe a couple months ago, where we talk just about that book primarily. The Limits of Papal Authority with regard to the liturgy. It is an excellent interview. I've done many interviews with Father Ripperger. This was probably the best one we ever did. So I would encourage you, go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Taylor Marshall, and put in Father Ripperger, Ripperger. And I think the name of the videos was, Can the Pope Ban the Latin Mass? Something like that. Anyway, it's within this past year. Excellent, excellent interview with Father Ripperger, who is a genius. In his book, I highly recommend Limit of Papal Authority. All right, let's take, I don't see any more super chats. Take another. Everybody's loving on Father Ripperger, of course. One more comment and question. St. Michael Defend Us 77. I hope Cardinal Pizzaballa becomes the new pope. I could see that. I definitely could see that. He's in the top 3 or 5 contenders, in my opinion. As someone who watches all this stuff pretty regularly, I did a video within the last month on Cardinal Pizzaballa. Great name, Pizzaballa. Cardinal Pizzaballa. He is the Patriarch of Jerusalem. He's a cardinal, and he's kind of more of a shadow candidate, but lately he's become more well-known. I think him being elected as Pope is he's definitely a contender. So if you want to learn more about him and why I think that, check out my previous video on Cardinal Pizzaballa. You need to pray the Rosary every day. You know, I know you hear me say this. Pray the Rosary every day. You need to pray the Rosary every day. So please pray the Rosary every day. Please go to confession every 2 to 4 weeks. Find a traditional Latin Mass if you can. Eastern Divine Liturgy, beautiful as well. Lovely. Take your Catholic faith seriously. It is the most important thing in your life. You must know Jesus Christ. You must know him and be united to him in the Holy Eucharist. You must know him in the Word of God. Read the sacred scriptures. Surround yourself with people who hold your same beliefs. Marry people who hold your beliefs. Raise your children to hold your same beliefs. Catechize them in the truth. This is so serious. I want to challenge all of you. Find a traditional Latin Mass. Pray the Rosary every day. Take on the Catholic identity. When you're in public, when you pray in public, say, In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Make the sign of the cross. Every time you make the sign of the cross in public, whoever sees you make that sign of the cross in a restaurant, in a public place, God places a drop of grace on that person. It's a little drop of grace. Everybody who sees that. Be that person who facilitates the drops of grace. Take up space. And remember that our Lord Jesus Christ says you're the light of the world and the salt of the earth. So go out there and be salty. God bless. My name is Dr. Taylor Marshall. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and we'll see you in the next video. God bless and Godspeed.